All right, let's get into one of the biggest puzzles in modern psychiatry. Why is it that antidepressants can be a total lifesaver for some people, but do almost nothing for others? Well, a really fascinating 2024 paper by Zofa Kozak and Christopher Miller suggests the answer might be hiding in a place you'd never expect: psychedelic research.
So let's start with that central puzzle, SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. They're the most common antidepressants out there. And for some people, they are absolutely life-changing. But for so many others, they have little to no effect. And sometimes they can even seem to make things worse.
You can imagine this inconsistency has been a huge headache for researchers and doctors for decades. But a totally new way of looking at the problem is starting to emerge, and it's coming from the really cutting-edge world of psychedelic science. So what we're going to do is explore this surprising and honestly pretty powerful link between common antidepressants and psychedelic compounds like psilocybin. Yep, that's the active ingredient in magic mushrooms. So, what is the big connection here? I mean, how could these two totally different types of drugs with such different effects be related? Well, it turns out they seem to share a really deep fundamental mechanism of action right inside the brain. And that shared mechanism all comes down to one word: neuroplasticity. This is just the brain's incredible ability to change, to rewire itself, to form new connections. It's literally the physical basis for how we learn and adapt to anything. This is such a great way to think about it. The drugs don't just fix the brain directly, the way an antibiotic kills bacteria. What they do instead is make the brain temporarily more malleable, like wet cement or soft clay. They basically just open a window for change to happen. And this is where it gets really interesting, because it brings us to this idea of critical periods. Think about how unbelievably fast little kids learn a language. That's because their brains are in this special window of high sensitivity to everything around them. What the research is suggesting is that both SSRIs and psychedelics can actually reopen these critical periods in the adult brain. So, okay, if the brain is suddenly more sensitive and open to influence, what does that actually mean for treatment? Well, psychedelic research has a very, very clear and crucial answer to that question. In the world of psychedelic therapy, these two words are everything: set and setting. Set is all about your internal state, your mindset, what you expect to happen, how you're feeling emotionally. And setting is the external world, the room you're in, the people you're with, the relationship you have with the therapist. To have a good outcome, these two things are completely non-negotiable. And this right here is the key. The context, your mindset and your environment, is what actively shapes that soft clay of the plastic brain. It's literally the difference between a healing, positive experience and a scary, negative one. The drug just opens the door. The context is what determines what you find when you walk through it. All right, so how does all this circle back to antidepressants? Well, it seems like this exact same principle applies to SSRIs, and it might finally explain their unpredictable and, let's be honest, often confusing results. This brings us to a really game-changing theory called undirected susceptibility to change. The basic idea is that an SSRI doesn't have some kind of built-in antidepressant magic. Instead, it acts more like a catalyst. It makes your brain more sensitive and susceptible to whatever's going on in your life, amplifying both the good and the bad. And check this out. A study on mice illustrates this perfectly. They gave all the mice the same SSRI, but the ones who were in a positive, enriched environment, their depression-like behaviors went down and key markers for brain health went up. But the mice in a stressful environment, they actually got worse on the exact same drug. Same pill, totally opposite effects. The only difference was their setting. And unfortunately, we see a really powerful and kind of sobering parallel in humans. Studies have found that things like low income, low education, unemployment, basically chronic stressful environments, are strongly linked to poor antidepressant outcomes. And that's even when you control for things like access to healthcare. And get this, a major study looked at data from one of the largest antidepressant trials ever, and what they found was just stunning. Higher doses of an SSRI could amplify the influence of negative living conditions on a person's mood by up to 37 times. Just think about that. For some people, taking more of the drug simply made them more sensitive to their stressful reality. This really drives the point home, doesn't it? Making the brain more plastic and open to change is not automatically a good thing. If that change is happening in a stressful, unsupportive, or even traumatic environment, the medication can end up strengthening the very brain circuits that are causing depression and anxiety in the first place.
So what's the solution? I mean, we can't just snap our fingers and change everyone's living situation. But what the paper proposes is a really powerful shift in how we think about and approach treating depression.
It means we have to stop looking at the medication as the entire treatment. We need to start seeing it for what it might actually be, an amplifier. And once you do that, the focus shifts away from just the pill and on to the entire context of a patient's life.
So this suggests a whole new model. Step 1, you use the medication to open that window of brain plasticity. But then, and this is crucial, steps 2 and 3 are all about providing the right context, the right set and setting for actual healing. You guide that change with therapy, and you support the patient by helping address their real-world stressors.
And this right here is the big takeaway. In this model, therapy isn't just some optional nice-to-have add-on, it becomes the essential active ingredient. It provides the positive, structured setting you need to take that newly malleable brain and help mold it toward recovery and resilience. You know, this leaves us with a pretty big, thought-provoking question. It pushes the whole conversation way beyond the pill and the therapy room. It suggests that if we really want to treat depression effectively, we have to think not just about brain chemistry, but about the environments and the society that shape our minds from the very beginning.